Did you know one of the city's wealthiest men once worked as a gravedigger and a brick mason before running an $89 billion tech empire? That's the kind of twist we're talking about in this countdown of Toronto's 10 richest families who control the Canadian economy. At number 10, the Fidani Family, Orlando Corporation. Most billionaires just can't resist slapping their names on stadiums, skyscrapers, or even vanity yachts. But the Fidani family? They've taken the opposite approach, building one of the largest private empires in Canada while staying so low-key that most Torontonians couldn't pick them out of a lineup. At the center of it all is Carlo Fidani, who today runs Orlando Corporation. The name may not scream dynasty, but the numbers do. Over 40 million square feet of real estate across the Greater Toronto area. That's warehouses, office towers, shopping centres, and industrial hubs that keep Toronto's economy humming. Chances are you've worked in, shopped at, or at least driven past one of their properties without realising you were on Fidani turf. What makes their story particularly fascinating is not just the sheer scale of their holdings, but how Carlo has tied it all back into the city. In 2010, he made headlines with a jaw-dropping 50 million Canadian dollars donation to the University of Toronto's Faculty of Medicine, the largest in the school's history at the time. Add to that another 10 million Canadian dollars to Trillium Health Partners, and suddenly you see why hospitals and med schools around Toronto quietly carry the Fidani imprint. Net worth estimates hover around $4.3 billion, making them one of Toronto's richest families. And yet, despite controlling more of the city's physical landscape than almost anyone else, the Fidanis remain practically invisible. It's almost funny. They've built a real estate empire that shapes how millions of people live and work, but they themselves prefer to stay in the shadows. In a world where billionaires crave attention, the Fidani playbook seems to be, why show off when you already own half the skyline? And while their low-profile empire is fascinating, the next family shows that sometimes wealth doesn't stay in the shadows at all, especially when it involves a billionaire murder mystery. At number 9, the Sherman family, Apotex Pharmaceuticals. If the Fidani story is about quiet wealth, the Sherman's legacy is the exact opposite. One of the loudest, most shocking billionaire sagas Canada has ever seen. Barry Sherman was the genius behind Apotex, a company he founded in 1974 that went on to become Canada's largest pharmaceutical manufacturer. His mission was to make life-saving drugs affordable by producing generics. At its peak, Apotex supplied medicine to over 115 countries, employing thousands and reshaping healthcare access worldwide. Despite this global reach, Barry was famous for his frugality. Billionaire? Yes. But he drove an old car, wore cheap clothes, and lived like an ordinary Toronto businessman. His wife, Honey, balanced that low-key persona with high-profile philanthropy, donating millions to hospitals, Jewish charities, and universities. But here's where the story takes a chilling turn. In December 2017, Barry and Honey Sherman were found murdered in their Toronto mansion, in what initially looked like a murder-suicide. Police later ruled it a double homicide that was staged to throw investigators off. Interestingly, the case remains unsolved to this day, making it one of Canada's most infamous billionaire mysteries. Financially, the Shermans were worth billions, and even after Apotex was sold in 2022, their wealth, combined with their legacy of philanthropy, remains significant. Yet the tragedy overshadows everything. They were two of the richest business leaders in Toronto, but they ultimately became the subjects of a real-life crime thriller that continues to grip Canada. That's shocking enough, right? But here's the thing. As bizarre as the Sherman story is, the next billionaire on our list might be even stranger. That's because he went from digging graves to running a $60 billion tech empire. At number 8, the Leonard family, Constellation Software. If you've ever thought your odd summer job couldn't possibly lead to greatness, meet Mark Leonard. Before he became one of Toronto's wealthiest tech moguls, He worked as a mason, a gravedigger, and even a venture capitalist. Then, in 1995, he founded Constellation Software, a company built on a quirky but brilliant idea: buy up small, niche software companies that nobody else wanted. Fast forward a few decades, and Constellation is now an $89 billion empire, quietly powering airlines, hospitals, governments, and countless industries with specialized software. It's one of Canada's most valuable tech firms. But here's the kicker: most people wouldn't recognize Mark Leonard if he walked past them on the street. That's because Leonard is famously private. He doesn't give interviews, rarely appears in public, and has carefully cultivated a reputation as Canada's most reclusive billionaire. Investors describe him with near cult-like admiration, praising his long-term strategy and ability to grow an empire without ever chasing the spotlight. His personal fortune is estimated at $5.2 billion US, and unlike most flashy tech founders, Leonard has stayed true to his roots in modesty. The Mason-turned-software king narrative gives him a mythic quality, part mystery man, part financial wizard. So while the Sherman's wealth became a front-page tragedy, Leonard's fortune is a case study in quiet, calculated brilliance. But don't get too comfortable, because the next family isn't about quiet or tragedy. It's about loudly owning the very sports teams that define Toronto's identity. At number 7, the Tanenbaum family, sports and construction power. If you've ever worn a Maple Leafs jersey, screamed courtside for the Raptors, or followed Toronto FC on a chilly night at BMO Field, you've already brushed shoulders with Larry Tanenbaum's empire. This is the man and the family that literally owns Toronto's sports culture. The Tanenbaum fortune began with construction. Larry's father was part of Kilmer Van Nostrand Company, Ltd., a civil engineering company that laid the groundwork, quite literally, for much of Ontario's modern infrastructure. But Larry wasn't content just to pour concrete. He had his eyes on something bigger. In the 1990s, he pulled off a masterstroke, bringing the NBA to Toronto by helping secure the franchise rights to the Raptors. From there, his influence ballooned. Today, he's the chairman of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, MLSE, which owns the Toronto Maple Leafs, NHL, Toronto Raptors, NBA, Toronto FC MLS, and even the Argonauts CFL. That's billions in sports assets, but more importantly, it's cultural ownership. In a city where sports rivalries cut across generations, MLSE has become Toronto's heartbeat. And Tanenbaum has the pacemaker. Beyond the arenas, Tanenbaum's Kilmer Group operates as a quiet investment powerhouse, stretching into infrastructure, media, and real estate. With a net worth hovering around $2.8 billion US, Larry isn't the richest man in Toronto, but his reach is far beyond numbers. He's known as a deal maker with enviable political ties and a knack for shaping not just business deals, but the city's cultural narrative. Philanthropy also runs deep. From major donations to Mount Sinai Hospital to initiatives supporting education and Jewish community causes, the Tanenbaum legacy has always balanced business with giving. So the next time you're celebrating a Raptors win or cursing another Leafs playoff collapse, remember, the Tanenbaum family is pulling the strings behind it all. And while they own Toronto's cheering crowds, the next family on our list owns something a little quieter but far more profitable: the suburban sprawl itself. At number 6, the Goldhar family, Smart Centres Real Estate. Few people can say they reshaped how Canadians shop. Mitchell Goldhar can. In the 1990s, when malls were still the cool hangout spot, Goldhar flipped the script by introducing Walmart-anchored smart centres across Canada. Think open-air plazas where convenience reigned supreme, cheap, accessible, and strategically planted in the heart of suburban communities. Today, Smart Centres controls 265-plus shopping centres, including 175 Walmart-anchored developments. For perspective, that's an empire stretching from coast to coast, with footprints in virtually every suburban pocket Canadians call home. Goldhar's vision didn't just give Walmart a gateway to Canada, it redefined the suburban shopping experience entirely. But retail was just the beginning. Goldhar realized suburbs couldn't survive on shopping alone. Enter his Vaughan Metropolitan Centre project, a multi-billion-dollar plan to turn what used to be farmland north of Toronto into a bustling urban hub with condos, offices, and transit. He's essentially been rewriting the rules of urban planning, moving beyond strip malls into city building itself. Net worth around $2.7 billion US dollars. And unlike many real estate moguls, Goldhar has some quirks. He's a passionate soccer fan and the proud owner of Maccabi Tel Aviv FC, Israel's most successful soccer club. If controlling Canada's suburban retail wasn't enough, he's also managing goals, transfers, and stadium roars an ocean away. Philanthropy ties it all together. Goldhar has invested heavily in education and sports development, giving back to the communities that fueled his business. At his core, Goldhar is an urban visionary who took the boring shopping plaza and transformed it into a billion-dollar machine. But while he reshaped how Toronto suburbs function, our next rich family went even bigger, shaping where those suburbs exist in the first place. At number 5, the Gilgan family, Mattamy Homes. If Toronto had an official home builder-in-chief, it would be Peter Gilgan. As founder of Mattamy Homes, he didn't just build houses, he built entire neighborhoods. Since 1978, his company has constructed more than 135,000 homes across North America, making it the largest privately owned home builder in Canada. Gilgan's genius was scale. He spotted early on that Toronto's population boom needed matching suburban growth. From Mississauga to Oakville to Milton, if you've ever driven through GTA subdivisions with perfectly manicured lawns and winding crescents, chances are you've been inside a Mattamy community. His developments didn't just house people, they reshaped Toronto's suburban identity. The empire didn't stop at homes. Gilgan expanded into master-planned communities, golf courses, and large-scale mixed-use developments, always a step ahead in anticipating how Canadians wanted to live. That vision translated into serious wealth. His family fortune is estimated around $6.4 billion US dollars. Yet Gilgan isn't just building for profit. He's one of Toronto's most generous philanthropists. In 2019, he donated a record 100 million Canadian dollars to Toronto's Sick Kids Hospital, at the time the single largest individual gift in Canadian healthcare history. Earlier, he gave 40 million Canadian dollars to the same hospital, alongside multi-million-dollar donations to universities and community healthcare. These aren't token gestures, they're transformational sums shaping the future of medicine in Canada. And that's what makes Gilgan's story so compelling. He took the most ordinary thing, suburban housing, and scaled it into billions, then redirected that wealth into saving lives and funding research. In a sense, Gilgan built not just Toronto's neighborhoods, but also its hospitals, universities, and communities. So while the Goldhars gave Canadians new ways to shop, the Gilgans gave them places to live. Next up, we have a family in our countdown that proves that wealth isn't just about real estate or construction. Sometimes it's about bread, milk, and groceries on every table. At number 4, the Weston family, retail and food giants. You can't talk about Canadian wealth without mentioning the Westons, the family that figured out how to feed an entire nation and look good doing it. Their story began humbly in 1882 when George Weston opened a Toronto bakery. One bakery turned into a bread empire, and generations later, the family still controls one of Canada's most essential and profitable industries, food retail. At the heart of the empire sits Loblaw Companies Limited, Canada's largest food retailer. If you've ever shopped at No Frills, Loblaw's, Shoppers Drug Mart, or bought a President's Choice product, you've padded the Weston fortune. They crack the code on branding and loyalty programs with PC Optimum, making grocery shopping not just a necessity, but a points-driven obsession for millions of Canadians. But groceries are only part of the story. The Westons also played in the luxury market, owning Holt Renfrew, Canada's answer to or Harrods, and until recently, the Selfridges Group in the UK, which they sold in 2021 for billions. This duality, butter tarts for the masses, Prada for the elites, shows the family's knack for covering every retail angle. The family fortune runs into the tens of billions, making them not just wealthy, but an unavoidable presence in Canadian daily life. Whether you're clipping coupons or swiping a platinum credit card, chances are you've been funneled through a Weston business. Philanthropy is also a cornerstone of their legacy. Initiatives like the Weston Brain Institute fund cutting-edge neuroscience research, while the family has poured millions into conservation and the arts. Their generosity is as wide-ranging as their retail reach. So yes, the Westons may not own your favorite hockey team, but they probably own the grocery aisle where you buy your snacks before the game. And while they dominate retail, the next family controls something even bigger, the airwaves and the devices in your pocket. At number 3, the Rogers family, telecom titans. Imagine a family so powerful that their name is on your phone bill, your internet connection, your TV, and even your favorite baseball team. That's the Rogers family. Their empire didn't just grow, it multiplied into every corner of Canadian daily life. The story started with Edward S. Rogers Sr., who invented the batteryless radio in the 1920s. His son, Ted Rogers, saw the future in broadcasting and telecommunications. What began as radio quickly expanded into cable TV, wireless networks, and eventually a corporate titan known today as Rogers Communications. With a net worth of over $11 billion, the Rogers family controls one of Canada's largest telecom and media companies. They own Sportsnet, a major player in Canadian sports broadcasting, and, perhaps most famously, the Toronto Blue Jays, the country's only Major League Baseball team. When Toronto fans cheer at Rogers Centre, they're literally standing inside the family's branded empire. But as with many dynasties, wealth came with drama. After Ted Rogers passed away in 2008, the family spiraled into a series of boardroom power struggles. Headlines were filled with feuds between family members, rival board factions, and attempts to seize control of the company. In other words, it wasn't just cable channels they provided entertainment on. Sometimes the drama came straight from their boardroom. Despite the chaos, the Rogers name remains synonymous with connectivity. Every time you stream a show, send a text, or catch a Blue Jays game, their fingerprints are on the experience. And with their unmatched mix of media influence and sports ownership, they've ensured that their fortune is tied directly to Canada's everyday habits. From phone calls to home runs, the Rogers family connects Canadians in ways no other dynasty can. But as influential as they are, they can't beat our next family, who didn't just connect Canadians, but linked the world. At number 2, the Thompson family, Woodbridge dynasty. When Roy Thompson bought a tiny Ontario radio station in the 1930s, no one could have predicted it would snowball into a global media empire. But with grit and vision, he built the foundation of what is today one of the wealthiest and most influential families in the world, the Thompsons. The real turning point came when Roy acquired the Times of London in the 1960s, marking the family's entrance onto the global stage. Decades later, their crown jewel became Thomson Reuters, the financial information giant whose data powers stock markets, trading floors, and financial news worldwide. It's not just a media company. It's the backbone of global finance. Through their holding company, Woodbridge, the family maintains tight control of these assets, while also owning the Globe and Mail and stakes in Bell Canada. Collectively, their net worth tops $70 billion, cementing them as Canada's richest dynasty. What makes the Thompsons fascinating isn't just the scale of their fortune, but the contrast in how they wield it. They're notoriously private, often avoiding the spotlight despite controlling institutions that thrive on information and exposure. It's a rare paradox. The family that delivers the news is rarely ever the subject of it. Their influence extends far beyond Canada. Whether it's a banker in London, a trader in New York, or a journalist in Singapore, chances are they rely daily on Thomson Reuters data. That's power that stretches across continents, quietly, consistently, and profitably. But even among giants, there's one member of the family who stands apart, not just for her fortune, but for the unusual way she wields it. And that brings us to the crown jewel of today's list. At number 1, Sheri Brydson, the crown jewel of the Thompson dynasty. When you think of Canada's richest person, you might imagine a flashy billionaire with yachts, headlines, and scandals. But the reality is almost the opposite. The title belongs to Sheri Brydson, the eldest granddaughter of Roy Thompson and the largest individual shareholder of the family empire. With an estimated fortune of approximately $20 billion, she's Canada's richest woman, and yet she's nearly invisible in public life. Sheri's power lies in her 23% stake in Woodbridge, the Thompson family's holding company. That makes her the single largest stakeholder in the empire that controls Thomson Reuters, the Globe and Mail, and more. While her cousins handle the boardrooms and day-to-day operations, Sheri has positioned herself as the quiet powerhouse who ensures the family's control never slips. But she's not just sitting on paper wealth. In Toronto, she owns the Elmwood Spa and associated restaurants, blending business interests with her personal passions. Unlike many billionaires, Sheri avoids the spotlight, rarely giving interviews or public appearances. This mystique only adds to her influence. A billionaire who lets her empire speak louder than her words. Philanthropy is where she channels her visibility. Sheri is deeply committed to causes like women's rights, environmental conservation, and social development, often directing millions to grassroots initiatives. It's an approach that mirrors her personality, impactful, deliberate, and unflashy. Her wealth is staggering, but what truly sets her apart is the way she embodies the Thompson dynasty. While the family collectively sits on tens of billions, Sheri represents the quiet consolidation of that fortune in one person, a single figure holding more personal wealth than anyone else in Canada. In a world where billionaires often chase headlines, Sheri Brydson stands out for doing the opposite, quietly controlling an empire that shapes global finance while living a life most Canadians know nothing about. And that's what makes her the true crown jewel of Toronto's old money elite. And this marks the end of our journey through the 10 richest families of Toronto, with a large influence on Canada's economy. These people don't have to chase headlines because they're the one writing them. Which one of these billionaire families impressed you the most? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this exclusive tour through Canada's richest families, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more interesting content.